You're listening to Learn Japanese Pod with me, Alex, and you're listening to the Fun Friday edition. If this is the first time you've heard it, this is where we put away our Japanese textbooks temporarily on the shelf and talk about all things Japan, Japanese culture, and anything that happens to float into our heads. Although today we're doing an interview with a man further afield than Japan. I'm joined by Jason. How's it going?
Hey there. Hey, Alex.
Hey, good. And I should just introduce Jason to all of you who maybe haven't heard of him. And I guess you're a man of many talents. You're a traveler, an adventurer, a seasoned educator, a writer, an author. You've written for CNN Travel and the Japan Times, right? And also Jason is the creator of the website anepiceducation.com. It's a really well-written blog about his travels around the globe with his family and really interesting insights to what he's learned through those experiences. So if you're into art, music, food, what else? Camera tech and travel, you should definitely check it out. Another big topic is parenting. As Jason, you're a father of two, yes?
I am. I have a 12-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl.
Now, I should also mention that Jason is the author of Tokyo with Children, which is a guide for Tokyo aimed at families, and we'll be talking about that in more detail later on. So, my first question to you, Jason, is how the devil are you, sir?
I'm great, Alex. I'm doing quite well. I'm talking to you from sunny Penang, Malaysia, where we've set up shop for a little while, and before we head back to Japan in March.
Oh, you'll come back to Japan in March. Awesome. Yeah, so by the way, I'm here in Tokyo. Jason's all the way over there in Malaysia. What's the temperature there now?
It's shorts and flip-flop weather here. It's probably 24, 25, and then we'll be this way all the way through the winter.
I'm thoroughly jealous. It's just getting colder here, although beautiful, bright mornings. I shouldn't complain. This morning I was in Yoyogi Park. The leaves were looking absolutely beautiful.
Tokyo skies in the winter are fantastic.
Whereabouts in Malaysia are you living now?
We are in Penang, which is an island in the northwest corner of peninsular Malaysia, very close to the Thai border. Right. And it's been a great place to kind of plant ourselves for a while and kind of sort out some work and let the kids make some friends and then sort of it's a nice little jumping off point for the area. Sumatra, just a little hop on a plane in one direction. You got southern Thailand just above us, and it's a great place to travel as a solo traveler or as a family.
I guess I should really first ask you about like how you got to where you are now. So question number one is what was the inspiration behind your website and Epic Education, and what were the circumstances that led you to create it and also your travels?
Well, my wife and I had been living in Tokyo for about 13 years, and I love Tokyo, and our kids were growing up there. They were both born there. My wife is actually Japanese. She's from Osaka. And but we just were working a lot. We were both salary men, working on salary men schedules, and the four of us were just never in the house at the same time, or at least not in the house awake. We wanted to see the world, and we had been thinking about waiting, and we had this sort of pipe dream of when our kids graduate from high school, we'll take this big trip, and then it just started to realize that we wanted out of cubicles, and we wanted to travel, and we also wanted to let our kids see more of the world in an earlier time. Right. And it just sort of went from there. The more I started to research, the more I realized it was possible. And I also wanted my kids to kind of learn from me. Japanese elementary schools are fantastic, and they do a lot of really great things. and this isn't a criticism of the school system per se, but I knew when junior high school came around, there'd be a lot more time spent in juku, in cram schools, and in just basically lots of rote memorization. And I wanted them, even if we planned to return to Japan at some time in the future, I wanted them to kind of see more of how the rest of the world works before they return to that. Because it's a pretty blessed life. It's a pretty fortunate life living in Tokyo, and I wanted them to see that people live differently.
I do get the feeling, I've been in Japan for 20 years, maybe almost half of that has been in Tokyo. And I guess, what you're getting at is Tokyo is everything works, everything is convenient, everything's clean, everything's relatively safe. And yet I think it can feel insular, can't it? And maybe that's maybe what you and your family were feeling.
Indeed. I'm gauging my words carefully because I don't want to criticize Tokyo because it's a place I could go back. But it was one of those where we didn't live in a cosmopolitan area of Tokyo. We lived in sort of a working class neighborhood. Right. And our kids, we felt like their life just sort of surrounded around this one little neighborhood, and people didn't really talk about the outside world, as it were. Right. Now, you can find this in England. You can find this in many places in the United States. It's not necessarily a Japanese phenomenon. And we just realized that we wanted our kids to understand how big the world is and how different and how similar we were. That was another thing, was we felt like our kids, any disruption to their routine or anyone who kind of stood out a little differently, they noticed that in ways that and weren't fond of that, and we wanted them to realize that it's a big, diverse world out there. And so we decided that it was best to go out for a little while and see how it goes. And after 6 months, we realized we could keep going.
And I think your blog, your website, and Epic Education, like you really illustrate that well with all your blog posts. You write about all these experiences you've had. I'm like, one of the themes I think that runs through your blog is don't wait to do cool stuff. Be more open-minded. See where life takes you. And even though it might be scary, I guess if you kind of embrace it, cool stuff happens.
Indeed. We wanted, there's nothing wrong with schedule, and there's nothing wrong with routine, and there's nothing wrong with those things. But we also wanted, to sort of dive into things and kind of see how other things work. I would say the blog is basically just documenting this long experiment. I love to travel, but I've never been a real long-term traveler. We're now homeschooling our kids, and I used to be a teacher, an elementary school teacher 20 years ago, but I've never homeschooled. So this whole thing of working remotely, homeschooling and traveling all at the same time, I knew other people did it. I wanted to do it, and I wanted to kind of show how we did it so that people can maybe learn from our mistakes.
So that's a really interesting point, because I wanted to ask you, what kind of feedback and reactions have you been getting from, say, I don't know, the parents, other people interested in homeschooling, maybe other people who are interested in saying, hey, you know what, I think we need a change in our life as well as our kids, and we need to go somewhere new. What kind of feedback have you been getting?
Oh, well, I've got a lot of it's all been positive, I should say. I've got lots of encouraging, mail, encouraging us to move forward when I've written about our stumbles. I've heard from lots of people who, have been inspired and have been on the fence about doing something like this for a long time, and hopefully this will help them with that. And I guess what I've also realized, and that's sort of on the travel front. As far as the homeschooling front, I've, in the last year and a half, I've realized just how large and diverse the homeschooling community is. There are people who sit down and have a scheduled school time. It's basically just school at the kitchen table where the classes are, scheduled out. And then there are people who are on the other far end of that, the radical radical unschoolers and road schoolers and world schoolers. I would say the radical unschoolers are basically, there's no set pattern, just follow your interests. And then there's people who use a little bit of both. And we're still trying to figure out where we fit in that mix. We're still working on that.
I mean, I'm not quite sure what your plans are. You mentioned that you were coming back to Tokyo in March.
For a month. Just for a month.
Oh, just for a month. Oh, I see. Okay. I mean, this is a very hypothetical question, but like, if you came back to Japan long term, would you want to continue homeschooling, or would you put your kids back in the normal high school or junior high school?
Well, that's kind of a trick question because homeschooling is technically not legal in Japan,
right?
And so we couldn't really do that without some sort of I guess some legal jujitsu, with citizenship, I guess.
Japan is the land of legal jujitsu
and loopholes.
Indeed. We've actually had some. We've met some families, some German families that are traveling, and one of the reasons that they actually started traveling is so they could homeschool because it's illegal in Germany as well.
Interesting.
We would probably put them back in school if we were to come back. We would understand that, but it would be. It's been something I've thought about every so often. I would rather them not to have to deal with all of the sort of extra obligations that come with junior high school and high school. But to be honest, I haven't thought about that because we don't have a set plan to come back as of now. We'll be back in March for a month to update the book and just see family and sort of deal with some business things, and then we'll be heading to the Americas.
Coming back to update the book, that's a good segue into my next question, which is I've got $19 burning a hole in my pocket, and I need to get a book for my buddies who are moving to Tokyo with kids. What should I get them, Jason?
Well, you've come to the right place, my friend. I have put together an ebook that is called Tokyo with Children, and it is a compendium of some of my favorite places that I took my kids during our, during their toddlerdom and young child times. And I'm hoping that it will find a home with people who need it. I made this book because I wanted this book 12 years ago. When my son was born in 2002 in Ogikubo, actually. Actually, both of my children were born in Ogikubo.
Good old Chihuahua line. I know that. Yeah.
That's right. I was fairly new in Tokyo. I didn't speak much of the language at the time, and didn't have much money, and was struggling to find places to take them in those early years. And there is information. There's things in the Japan Times. There's things in Metropolis. There's in Tokyo Time Out, and then lots of other places. But there was no central place, and there was no. There was no book for that, and any kind of travel guides like Lonely Planet and such. There's just some little box relegated to the corner that gives you. This says go to Tokyo Disneyland. It's like, well, what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do on day 2?
Right.
So over the years, as I was there, I was taking my kids all over the place, and then I was writing for the Japan Times on music and art, and I asked if I could move into writing about places to for families. I wanted to write something about families because I sort of, grown a wealth of various places to go, and even the column wasn't enough. Because there's a lot of other stuff that I felt was good, and there was a lot of stuff that's not really on the radar as kid friendly.
Right.
I mean, there's lots of great places that are designed and built for children, but then there's lots of of art galleries and museums that are exceptionally child friendly, and and I wanted parents to know that when you're in this area, you can also go here and here.
So you can make a little itinerary, so you're not going to these single locations in the middle of nowhere. You can do a day out in this area. That's really useful.
Exactly, and I thought, I mean, there's a lot of expat families that are looking for these kinds of things. But then in our travels over the last year and a half, we've met lots of traveling families. Some some long-term travelers like us, and then other gap year type travelers that are planning to go to Tokyo, and they're going to be in town for a week, and they look in their tour guide and it tells them to go to Disneyland, it's some people want to know that they want a guide that's been vetted by a parent or has at least been experienced by parents and says, we've been to these places and our children enjoyed it.
Well, it's awesome because it's the thing that you wanted and needed, and it's been road tested by a professional. I think I might be purchasing a couple of copies for some of my friends who.
Oh, great! Yeah. Now I should say that the book is not comprehensive because Tokyo has way too many things to do. I mean, the book would be, if I put in every cool place to bring kids in Tokyo, the book would be 10 times the size. And Tokyo Disneyland and Disney Sea are not in the book because you don't need my opinion to take people there. Everybody can tell you that you're there. But the book reflects my tastes. It deals in art and science and architecture. But also lots of playgrounds and fun open spaces and indoor places to go when it rains or it's too cold, and tons of free stuff.
So what are your future plans for the book? You're just going to be updating it, or will you be adding more information as it goes, or what will you be doing?
Well, I'm hoping to update it again when we're there in the spring, and possibly add more places. I'm working on an Osaka and Kansai book as well, and I'm looking into an app. I think an app would be a nice thing to supplement with this, but I need to see if that's the direction it needs to go right now. But I'm working on an Osaka book as well as other cities in Southeast Asia. But I'd like to focus on the places I know best in Japan, and then see where it goes from there.
I was talking to one of the listeners to the podcast, the Japanese Pod podcast, and he visited Tokyo about 2 years ago, and I was just saying to him, or I was asking him, what advice would you give to someone who's visiting Tokyo for the first time? And he gave me a list of apps. He said, you've got to download these apps, you've got to have Google Maps, and you've got to have this, and you've got to have this translator. And like those apps made my life a lot easier, and you've got to tell your listeners to download them. And so I think like a Tokyo with Children app would be fantastic.
Wow, yeah.
You've got one order from me. I know people who I know people who would want to get that. Awesome. Let me ask you kind of one last question about Tokyo with Children. Give me one of your top picks from the guide. What would you like? What's one really cool place to take your kids in Tokyo?
Well, I mean, there's lots of places that. Well, let's see. Where would we think? Well, one unlikely one that I was just talking about, as far as just places that wouldn't be on the family-friendly radar would be the Louis Vuitton Gallery.
Yes, in Omotesando, right?
That's right in the middle of the glitzy, Omotesando shopping street, on a top floor of the flagship store of this big French fashion brand. They have a free gallery with fantastic artists in there, and and it's open to the public. And so you have to walk through the Louis Vuitton store, which that was the first time for me to do that. But my daughter and I would go up there, and a lot of the pieces are usually interactive. There was this massive knit sculpture by a Brazilian artist named Ernesto Neto, which was like hanging from the ceiling. It looked like a jungle gym, and you were allowed to climb in it.
Actually, I went to that exhibition. It was fantastic. It brought out my inner kid.
Amazing, right? And
it was fantastic.
And it's free, and they sometimes hand out free hardback retrospective books of the artist's work. And that's just not something that shows up in Lonely Planet, much less kind of a travel with kids book. And it's a place, every place that I put in the book is somewhere that I've been at least once, and sometimes, in many cases, dozens of times. And I wanted to include both places that are well known, just to give the sort of stamp of approval of saying that this is a place that you will enjoy as an adult, but your children will enjoy it too. And then also places that may not be on a regular parent's radar, and that would be one.
Right. Jason, thank you very much for making the guide. I think it's you've done a great service to maybe parents who are thinking of moving to Tokyo or are maybe worried about, how they're going to look after their kids in the metropolis.
Thanks, Alex.
And I think, maybe, if people get this guide, they can get some like really good, interesting new ideas, stuff that's off the beaten path, but really, really cool. So, I take my hat off to you, sir. Well done.
Thank you.
Just last couple of things. You're coming over in March. We should definitely hang out and have a beer sometime.
I'd love that.
It'll be warming up then, so I think when you come over here, you'll see all these like incredibly happy Tokyoites, like the sun again.
Oh, I know. Well, my fingers are crossed that I'm going to hit Hanami season. If I was able to hit that would be amazing. That'd be great.
Yeah. Well, Hanami beer under the sakura leaves in Yoyogi would be nice. That would be awesome. Well, hey, Jason, thank you so much for talking to me. And again, check out Jason's stuff at anepiceducation.com and tokyowithchildren.com, where you can get his guide for, looking after kids in Tokyo and taking them to cool places and not going insane and pulling your hair out on rainy weekends. I think that's what that book is about. Anyway, thanks so much, Jason. Awesome speaking to you. Arigatou gozaimashita.
Thank you. Arigatou gozaimasu.